Hello, Michal Hucko here and welcome to another lecture of our REST API class. In this lecture, we're going to talk about Django apps. In the previous lecture, I showed you how to create your very first Django project. And I mentioned that the code is organized into projects, which are later organized into smaller units, which are called applications. Now, let's think about why do we need applications. Many times, big REST APIs or Backend APIs or web applications which are built in the Django consists of multiple smaller reusable parts. Imagine you are implementing an e-shop where you have the functionality of looking through a catalog of products which your website is providing. Then you have a capability to create your shopping cart and add the things which you want to buy into the basket. And then let's say you have the capability of paying the basket and selling the things in your e-shop. Now let's imagine you want to create another e-shop and you want to reuse some parts of the previous e-shop. When you structure your code into these smaller components, reusable components, which we're gonna call apps, you can just take this app and move it in between different projects. There are lots of apps available on the internet which you can reuse for your projects if you want. Now, let me show you how you can create your very first application, and we're gonna go through a very small example how you can create your first endpoint in this application. So right now I'm in my Visual Studio Code in the school project which we created in the previous lecture, in the previous video. As you can see, here is the school project folder which was created for us. And because we ran the run server command last time, the db.sqlite3 file was created in this folder. Now, I'm running right now everything from the terminal which is built into Visual Studio Code because in the previous video I was showing you how to run things from this command line which is part of my Windows machine, and some of you may be confused because this is not exactly the git bash. It's git bash tool running inside something which is called cmdir or commander, right? I don't know how to spell it properly in English. You can download this tool if you want because sometimes I'm working on the Windows. I have this tool and I have a git bash installed inside there, so it resembles the Linux file system in the computer, and I like to use it because I like Linux. Okay, going back to this project. Okay, Misha, how are we gonna create our first application? So, a few things to note here. I'm inside the virtual environment, which has the Django installed inside there. And I'm also inside this folder, which I'm showing you in this left pane here. So school project is my folder, right? You have to be inside there. So when you press ls, you will see here the files which are on the left. Now we're gonna run a command which is gonna create our first application. And you're gonna run this command against the manage_py, which is here. So the command is python manage_py. As I mentioned in the previous video, the manage_py is just sending all the arguments which it receives to a function which is called execute from command line, which is part of the Django core management system, and that's running Django behind the scenes. Sorry, sometimes this error will pop up. You can just close it. We can ignore it, or you can install the tool and you will no longer see this error. Later I will. So python manage_py, and the command which we're gonna run is called start app. So this is like start application, and here we're gonna specify the name of the application again. Make a big stop here and consult the name of the application with your colleagues who are working with you in the company. You should obey some guidelines. You should obey some customs in your company. Don't just make up the names. In this case, we're gonna call it school app for the purpose of learning, because this will create another folder here. And thanks to the naming conventions that I'm using here, you can then distinguish which folder was created with the app command and which was created with the project command. So when I run this command, you will see shortly, in a couple of seconds here left will be a new folder created. So you can see school app was created here. And this is important. Imagine I called the project school. How am I gonna call my app? The functionality which I want to put here should be resembling school. So the first idea is, okay, let's name it the same way, but then you will get lost because you will have two same folders, which is not allowed. Yeah, so you need to come up with a different name. So it's really up to the team. I don't want to put here some guidelines and force you to use something. No, consult this with your team and decide the proper naming conventions. There are no strict rules. It's up to you. You can name it as you want. This is basically just creating the folder structure for you. It's not like running something behind the scenes which you cannot undo, right? So if you want to delete the app in the future, you just grab this folder and delete it. So when you go inside the school app, again, a lot of files and folder, even a folder was created here for you. So let's go through the files one by one. Let's start with the __init__.py. There are two underscores, okay? Keep this in mind. Again, this is the same init as in case of school project. It's the same Python. This is a Python module and you can reuse it, import it anywhere else. This admin.py is connected with something which is called admin app, which is Django running out of the box. We ain't gonna use it too much. Maybe in the later lectures I will make a short lecture about how or what you can do with this admin py. It helps you to create, for example, accounts, to have some overview of your application and to create some special permissions for special people. Apps.py is a crucial part. It needs to be here because later we're going to include this application as part of the database schema for the whole application. We're going to talk about this later. This is just part of every app. Then the models.py is connected with mapping the objects from the Python, from the Django into the database later. So we're going to use some technique which is called ORM, Object Relation Mapping. Because you need to understand that data in the database is not data suitable for Python. In Python or programming languages, you're going to have data in kinds of variables or objects. We're going to use a lot of object-oriented programming. So you need to somehow, ensure the mapping from the objects to the database. Object relation mapping. Relational database object relation mapping, ORM. It's very popular. Go ahead and Google something about that. It's important. So in these models.py, we're going to define the classes which are going to reference or resemble the objects from the database. Fine, so that's the models.py. Then there is a test.py, and this is important. I'm a big fan of test-driven development, and in the company where I work, we are trying to do this, right? And in many companies, this is very popular approach of writing code. This course or this tutorial is not about test-driven development. So just keep in mind, if you want to write tests in the Django, tests.py is a suitable file where you should put your test cases, right? Sometimes you need a lot of test cases. In that case, it's good to create a folder for that with some tests data and configuration steps. So test.py or tests folder, that's the place. Now, views.py is a little bit tricky. You need to think about your backend as a server which is serving something to the front end or to requester. It doesn't have to be a front end, it can be a mobile phone or someone is querying your database. Now, views.py specifies the format, the data format which will be provided as a HTTP response. So all the HTTP responses should be specified here. Now, here can be a lot of endpoint specification. I mean, the responses for the endpoint specification, which you're going to see in a while. So then that's the views.py. Yep. It's also suitable when you want to create a whole web application with also the front end integrated. Here you're going to specify how you're going to return templates with the HTML files, this kind of stuff. So views.py, that's the place. Then there is this migrations.py, which is connected with the database. This is right now empty. In the future, you will see there are a couple of migration files, but here now it's just init.py saying like this is a Python module and you're going to use it later. So this is just the basic structure of school app, which is created for you by Python, by Django. You don't need to obey this structure if you don't want. Django is just creating it here for you to, somehow help you and so on. Now, the thing, what we want to do now is something which is called endpoint. Now, going back to the SWAPI, the Star Wars API, which I showed you previously, you remember this, and this is called endpoint. So you are going to list all the people playing in the Star Wars film. So you're going to access the endpoint /API/people. Okay. So when I'm going to talk about endpoints, I mean this /API /people or slash. I don't know if it's backslash or slash. I'm just confusing these two words. So we want to do now an endpoint, a first endpoint in our applications. Endpoints in the Django are connected with the applications. So the endpoint which we're going to do should look like this. We want to do endpoint on a local host 8000, and we want to do /school because we created a school application, school, and we're going to create an endpoint hello world. And when we're going to query this endpoint or send a GET request to this endpoint through this, let's say, Chrome, Google Chrome, we want to return simple hello Mihal or hello, your name, right? So how are you going to create this endpoint? Now, first things, you need to understand how these endpoints are being resolved by the Django. In the Django, if you remember, in the previous video, in the school project, I show you this settings.py. An endpoint is part of the URL, right? So in the settings.py, you need to search for, give me a second. This root URL conf. This is the root URL configuration, and you will see that this configuration is specified on school project-URLs. So if you go to the school project URLs, you will see all the available endpoints. This folder, this file has been created for you, so it's already there. And you can see that one endpoint is already specified. It's called admin, but right now we ain't gonna talk about admin. So when you run the application, Python manage py run server from the previous video, you will see that if you access this endpoint, this school/hello world, the endpoint is not available, but I want to show you one important response which the Django will give to you. So going back to my browser and pressing enter again, you will see this page not found 404. This is for something response, okay? So just recap, what does this for mean, okay? It's saying this page has not been found because there is only admin URL specified in the school URLs. You can see this page just because you specified the debug true options in the settings file as I showed you in the previous video. Please don't run this into production, okay? Because then everyone will see the structure of your application and that can be dangerous. So now we need to somehow add here another endpoint. And the endpoint which we want to specify is school endpoint. And the rest of the endpoint specification we want to specify inside the application. So how are we gonna do that? So first thing what you need to do, I already put it here, sorry, is to implement this endpoint first, the school endpoint here. You're gonna do it like this. You're gonna specify a new path. In this case, it will be school. And you're gonna say that this school will be specified inside the school app directory. You're gonna do it like include. Oh, come on. Include. And here you need to specify the path to the URLs, and you specify it the same way as here. So it's school.urls. So you can just copy this part here or just write it there. School app.urls. So now you need to specify endpoints within your application inside your Python project. So don't forget, this include needs to be here. And now the new endpoint specification in the school app, you go to the school app and you need to create this URLs file because it's not there by default. So you put here the URLs file. And again, you need to from Django that I think it's URLs, right? Yeah, you can see I don't remember everything by heart. You need to put here this path command or this path function. And now you need to specify here the same URL patterns. So the name of the variable needs to be the same. This is important. And the URL pattern which you want to do is path, and the path should be like hello-world. And this path then should return some HTTP response. Before I finish this file, you need to specify this HTTP response. And I mentioned it a couple of minutes ago, the HTTP response needs to be specified in the view file. So it's from Django that I think it's HTTP import HTTP import HTTP response. Now, I'm going to create here a function. The name of the function is up to you. I'm going to call it hello world, which will get a parameter of request. It doesn't have to be here now, I'm just saying. So every time this function is gonna be called, the request which was sent to the server is gonna be provided in this request variable. And the hello world endpoint or function in this case will just return an HTTP response. You remember we were talking about HTTP responses with the text of hello Michal. Okay. And now going back to these URLs, I'm in the URLs of the school app. Don't confuse this with the school project URLs, okay? In the school app, I'm saying I need to first import it here. So I'm going to use relative import. So I'm importing a whole views file. And I'm saying every time a hello world is being queried, please return the views that hello world function. And yeah, this views going to be here twice. And please name this endpoint as hello world. The name can be provided here. It's a good practice to put it here. I'm just putting it here. So that's nothing else what we need to provide here. Okay. Please remember there was some OS error. So the server failed. So you need to restart the server again. Sorry for these errors. They will just pop up there because I didn't install the linter properly. You can install the linter. You will get rid of the errors. You can press the install button and you should be safe. So what we did, just recap. You can close out the windows here. First things, settings.py specify that every URL will go through the school projects.urls. So in the school projects, I'm opening the urls.py. In the urls.py, the endpoint is going to be parsed. And it will first look at the school. Because if you remember, the endpoint which I want to specify starts with school. So all the data, all the whole endpoint, rest of the data, is going to be parsed through specification or through the function which is specified in the school path. It's saying, please send a rest of the endpoint. So the school is going to be, discarded from it. So only hello world will stay, and send the hello world to the school apps URLs. In the school apps URLs, there is a hello world specification saying, Whenever you receive something on this endpoint, please return function or return the body of the function which is specified in the hello world. And in the hello world is part of the views. So if I go to views, it just returns the HTTP response with the text hello Michal. If I go back now here and I refresh this page, in a couple of seconds you will see here hello Michal. So this is your first Django application. And this is your first Django endpoint. The key things which you need to remember is how the endpoints is being parsed in Django. That everything starts in the settings.py and everything is specified, or the base URL configuration is specified at the school projects.urls. So if you go to school projects.urls, here you need to specify how the application URLs, this is a project URLs, so how the applications URLs are part of the project's URLs. You need to include them using the function which is part of the URLs conf. All these helper functions are part of the Django. And we're going to use a lot of the functions from the Django. If you go to the views, the HTTP response, the class is part of the Django. I'm just importing it from that library, okay, from the framework. So this is important. Django just helps you to organize things, to make things simpler. By just adding few lines of code, I was able to create a new endpoint, okay, which is secure, safe, well, somehow secure, somehow safe, and it's doing what I want. In the future lectures, I'm going to show you how you can create few more endpoints, and I just want to give you two homeworks. The first homework is to create your second endpoint. Name it as you want. Let's say my name is, hi, my name is, blah, 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 and the endpoint should return your name and surname, okay? Or should return something more specific, right? Some bunch of lines of text. Please try to create your own URLs, try to then query this endpoint through the browser. The second part of this homework is try to query this endpoint through the Postman. We're going to use the rest of the Postman later because now we were just using GET requests. But in the future, we're going to use post, put, delete requests, and that cannot be sent from the Google Chrome. So we're going to use the Postman. So try these two things as part of your homework. That's everything for today's lecture. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Michal, and I hope I will see you in the next one.